This program is one of a series which accompanies the General Electric LM2500 instructions for the replacement of the variable stator vane feedback cable on the industrial model, and is designed as a supplement to the printed work package found in the maintenance manual. Aft looking forward, the variable stator vane feedback cable is located next to the transfer gearbox on the left side of the industrial model of the LM2500 gas turbine, between the 7 and 9 o'clock positions. Begin by removing the clamp located at approximately the midpoint of the feedback cable. This is the clamp that secures the cable to the aft side of the accessory gearbox. This is the clamp that secures the cable to the aft side of the accessory gearbox. At the upper bell crank end of the cable, remove the bolt and the nut fastening the cable end to the variable stator vane actuator bell crank. Release the cable end slowly to prevent damage to the servo valve. If the spring-loaded cable is allowed to snap back suddenly into the servo valve speed control, the internal stops could be damaged. At the other end of the cable, take out the bolt and the nut that hold the cable end to the servo valve arm. Now, remove the rod end bearing from the bell crank end of the cable. Also, remove the small jam nut from the cable tip. Do the same with the rod end bearing and the nut at the servo valve end of the cable. Next, slide back the rubber boot from the swivel ball and the jam nut at the upper bracket. Loosen this jam nut and separate the support sleeve tube from the cable. Sliding the feedback cable out of the micro adjust on the compressor stator bracket. Returning to the servo valve end of the cable, follow the same procedure when removing the feedback cable from the support sleeve and the lower bracket. The removal of the variable stator vane feedback cable is complete. To install the new feedback cable, insert one end of the cable from the aft side through the micro adjust on the compressor stator bracket. Holding the sleeve assembly on the forward side of the bracket, slide the cable through the bracket and into the sleeve. Then finger tighten the jam nut. Use the same method with the other end of the cable. Make sure that the swivel ball on the sleeve assembly is straightened out to allow the feedback cable to be inserted through the mounting bracket on the gearbox and the tube. Finger tighten the jam nut. Now, screw the small jam nut onto the tip of the feedback cable at the bell crank end. Install the rod end bearing onto the end of the cable to the maximum threaded depth. bearing can go no farther, back it off by 4 complete turns. Then, tighten the rod end bearing jam nut. Do the same for the rod end bearing at the servo valve end of the cable. When the bearing is at its maximum threaded depth, back it off by 4 complete turns. The next procedure in this operation will require the use of a pressure source capable of delivering 200 to 400 pounds per square inch gauge. The Vane actuators may be operated with either clean, dry shop air or regulated dry nitrogen. The actuators should be at the mid-stroke position before the feedback cable is adjusted. To do this, the pressure source must be attached to the servo valve supply and return ports. First, detach the supply and return hoses from the servo valve. Allow the excess oil from the hoses to drip into a plastic container underneath the servo valve. Next, attach the pressure source to the servo valve supply port. Torque this connection to 270 to 300 inch-pounds. Then, attach the slave hose from the pressure source to the servo valve return port. Now apply pressure to the servo valve inlet port. Do not exceed 200 psig. Usually 70 to 90 psig is sufficient to move the actuators. Using this pressure source, manually actuate the linkage to cycle the stator vane actuators from the fully open to the fully closed positions for a minimum of 2 times. Then, manually move the servo valve lever arm until the stator vane actuators are in mid-stroke. This would be approximately 18 degrees on a Vane protractor. The feedback cable now may be connected to the servo valve feedback lever arm with a nut and a bolt. Also, connect the other end of the cable to the stator vane bell crank with the nut and bolt through the rod end bearing. Torque both of these nuts to 24 to 27 inch-pounds. Then, safety wire the small jam nuts to the wire holes in the rod end bearing at each end of the cable. Also, safety wire the large jam nuts on the support sleeve assemblies to the small holes found in each of the brackets. Now install the clamp to secure the feedback cable to the aft side of the gearbox. Torque the clamp nut to 24 to 27 inch-pounds. Now the system must be rigged by the method described in the LM2500 Maintenance Manual Work Package 11800. After the rigging procedure is complete, remove the regulated pressure source and return the variable stator vane system to its operational configuration. Reattach the servo valve oil return hose, torquing it to 450 to 550 inch-pounds. The smaller oil supply hose should be torqued to 270 to 300 inch-pounds. This completes the replacement of the variable stator vane feedback cable. For a review of any part of this procedure, refer to the maintenance manual for the industrial model of the General Electric LM2500 gas turbine.